Some years ago, I was, in fact, at this event, and I was listening to a talk by Amit Goswami, a brilliant talk on the current state of physics. And it occurred to me while listening to that while physics provides us with extraordinary metaphors for the spiritual life, while it gives us a clue to the interrelationship of mind and matter, that mind has an influence on matter and that it's all rolled together, that what science is doing is it's giving us metaphors for something we sense about ourselves and our consciousness. But science is always dealing with quantitative measurements and mathematics. So it is quantitative science. And dear brother Amit at one point said, with great humility, after someone asked him a question about is the great consciousness conscious of him, and he answered very humbly, and I said, no, I can't imagine, I can't conceive that infinite intelligence and consciousness would care about me. I'm not that important. And I totally respect his humility for saying that. But I wondered, did he never experience the sense of being loved in a cosmic sense? Did he never experience a sense of what I can only call divine mercy and guidance operating in human life? How some tender, intelligent, loving something is touching every detail of every human narrative. Did he not experience that? Then I realized it's as if there's two parallel universes going on here. Science informs us in ways that can be practically applied through quantitative measurements. But everything that is most important to any human being is invisible. Friendship, love, courage, generosity, humility, relationship. All of these are essentially invisible and of the invisible world. And if you or I experience compassion, if you or I feel that there's something in us that is longing for relationship, not out of neediness or dependency, but as a natural impulse. If you or I have known that there's nothing more satisfying than to be recognized by another human being in conscious presence. All of these are experiences of the invisible world. So what I want to try to talk about today, I've called it the qualitative science of the heart, is to sort of bring us into this other dimension of reality, which science does not touch. Yes, we can do measurements of electrical patterns in the brain, and we can see that in a certain state of ecstasy, it looks like this. But no instrument can actually measure that subjective experience. So it's as if we have two realities side by side. I had a PowerPoint presentation prepared, and I had also a long talk I was going to read to you. I'll post the talk on Sufism.org. You can read it next week if you're interested. I ditched the PowerPoint. I'm going to rely on our imagination. In the PowerPoint, I had a picture of a Hubble telescope infrared image of part of the cosmos. Beautiful stars and cloud-like patterns. Visualize that for a moment. This is the quantitative universe. It's magnificent. And then I superimposed with some transparency something dimly behind it. You could almost not tell what it was, but something behind those stars. And gradually I brought it out. So we're doing this in our imagination, which I think is another faculty I want to talk about. And as this background image comes forth, it's nothing but roses, roses, roses. This is the parallel universe of the invisible. And this is the universe that I want to try to share with you this morning. And share it from within the perspective of the Islamic Sufi tradition, which is my spiritual home, but which I came to after traveling the path of non-duality. And I understand Islam and Sufism as a profoundly non-dual teaching. Let me give you some idea of what I'm talking about. First of all, in any talk that a Sufi would give in a sacred context, and I do consider this a sacred context, I would begin by saying, in the name of God, the infinitely compassionate and infinitely merciful. Just to remind us of our context. God, what do we mean by God? The most common synonym for God in Arabic after Allah is haq. Haq means the real, or if you like, reality in the ultimate sense of reality. There are different realities and different levels of perception, of course. An ant has one reality, a cow another, etc. But haq, the reality, is the foremost synonym for God in this tradition. And the foremost affirmation in Islam, which I'm sure you've heard, probably and perhaps with today's media in some unfortunate context, La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Translated in various ways, but I'm going to give you a non-dual translation, which I believe is the truth and can be supported even in terms of Orthodox Islam. There is no God. There is only the unified oneness we call Allah, which cannot be described or conceptualized, and besides which nothing else exists but that. La ilaha illallah. So, this parallel universe, the science, the qualitative science of the heart, is a science that has been explored and researched by human beings who have used the human heart as the instrument of perception. And the Sufi tradition has a lot of knowledge and practice in this field. It is an applied spirituality. And the things I'm going to be saying today, and the world, the perspective I'm trying to bring us into, it is not just a theoretical description. There's nothing I will say today that I haven't experienced, that hasn't been real for me. So, but I want to share a description because even with some of our very dear, beloved, intelligent, and conscious teachers that we've heard so far, who have been very rigorous about their own consciousness, their own experience, there are always assumptions embedded in any of these systems. We've been around long enough to maybe have a sense of that. Even the attempt to be completely assumptionless is never quite complete. So forgive me if I offer you descriptions that may be metaphoric, they may be poetic, because poetry is also a way towards the non-dual. Poetry is a way of saying one thing and meaning another. It is making connections within this non-dual reality. And poetry is the language of the soul, the language of the heart. And maybe one day I'll talk to Maurizio about this. Maybe we can have a science, poetry, and non-duality conference. So, in the Islamic description of the reality, reality has 7 primary attributes. The reality itself has these attributes. I've heard people questioning here, well, how is it that we know? And questioning, how do certain experiences arise in the human being? Where do they come from? Well, in our glimpse of reality, the qualitative universe, side by side or unified with the quantitative universe, has attributes such as this reality is knowing. This reality is willing, meaning it has power. This reality is living. This reality is seeing. This reality is hearing. This reality is loving. And this reality is communicating. So we solve a lot of philosophical problems with ascribing these attributes to haq, to the real. Now, I said there have been great scientists of the heart, one of whom is our beloved Jalaluddin Rumi, who has carried a description of reality to extraordinary heights in maybe 50,000 lines of poetry. Would you like to hear a few lines that touch on the very nature of reality from Rumi? Okay. This is a translation from our translation from a book called Love's Ripening. Oh my God, our intoxicated eyes have blurred our vision. Forgive us. A little comment. Our eyes have been intoxicated. We're not seeing reality as we could. And so Rumi is saying, forgive me. For you, and again in his poetry, there is this immense you that he often addresses. Why? Is this dualistic? Let's wait and see. You are hidden. And yet from east to west, you have filled the world with your radiance. Your light is more magnificent than sunrise or sunset. And you are the inmost ground of consciousness, revealing the secrets we hold. You are an explosive force, causing our dammed up rivers to burst forth. You whose essence is hidden, while your gifts are manifest. You are like water, and we are like millstones. You are like wind, and we are like dust. The wind is hidden, but the dust is plainly seen. You are the invisible spring, and we are your lush garden. You are the spirit of life, and we are like hand and foot. Spirit causes his hand to close and open. You are intelligence, and we are your voice. Your intelligence causes this tongue to speak. Your joy, and we are laughter. For we are the result of the blessing of your joy. All our movement is really a continual profession of faith. All our movement is really a continual profession of faith, bearing witness to your eternal power. Just as the powerful turning of the millstone professes faith in the river's existence. Dust settles upon my head and upon my metaphors. For you are beyond anything we can ever think or say. And yet, this servant cannot stop trying to express your beauty in every moment. Let my soul be your carpet. So, the human being intrinsically has something that the mystics have called the heart. One of my teachers surprised me by saying, "Oh, the heart, it is the complex of subtle, subconscious, superconscious faculties in the human being." The heart is the organ that senses relationship. The heart is the organ that experiences this universe qualitatively. Sometimes the impulses of the heart open up to us possibilities of humanness that seem to carry us beyond the mere, mental function of consciousness. Of course, consciousness is not merely mental. We should never understand it that way. Consciousness is everything, including the heart, including this qualitative dimension. But for us, as human beings, we have some very legitimate experience that can lead us deeper and deeper and deeper. And let me give you an example from our own classical Western tradition, from the great mathematician and scientist Pythagoras. Pythagoras said, let me get it right. He said, the highest duty is honor to self. The highest duty is honor to self. What impulse was arising from him? What does he mean? What can you sense the aspiration in that? He certainly doesn't mean it the way Donald Trump would mean it. The highest duty is honor to self. The sense of the preciousness of self, that perhaps the ripened fruit on the tree of existence is the mature human being, the enlightened, conscious, loving human being. You may be aware that, for instance, that in Buddhism we have the Heart Sutra, we don't have the Brain Sutra. So Sufism has a lot of experience in the purification of the heart, because the heart can be in many different states. And actually in the Quran, there really is a kind of scientific description, though it's a bit hidden, of the different states of the heart. A heart can be whole, or it can be diseased, or it can be hardened, or it can be numbed. It can be whole, and it can be illuminated. So your heart is your most precious faculty. And how do we know if the heart is illuminated or numbed? When the heart is numb, everything is a thing, even other people. They're just objects to be manipulated, exploited, etc. But as the heart awakens, not only does the capacity for relationship and the capacity for love increase, but we begin to live in a more and more animate universe. Trees come alive, minerals, rivers, mountains are perceived as animate entities. All of existence begins to appear, as we say, as the theater of divine manifestation, manifesting the attributes, the names of God, of which 99 are classically considered in Sufism, but it is recognized that God has so many names, and this is a quote from the Quran, that if the oceans were ink and all the trees of the forest were pens, you would never exhaust the words of God, the words of reality. So the human heart has the capacity to enter into this qualitative reality, to sense and feel the possibilities of being human. Not as something separate from the whole, but always in conjunction with the whole, always in very direct relationship. I'll share with you perhaps one of the most practical, simple explanations for our human situation that was given to me by a beloved teacher of mine who was from the Caucasus Mountains and who claimed to be, who said his tradition was 26,000 years old, an oral tradition. He said, nothing is actually sourced in the human being. The human being is nothing but a reflector with an element of will. But actually, every quality that we value is sourced, let's say, in haq, in the reality, in God, if you like. Our task is to polish our own mirror, to reflect those qualities in the way that each of us can uniquely reflect those qualities. So, really, consciousness, if we have it, is sourced in haq. Forgiveness, if I have any capacity for forgiveness, it's not from me, it's sourced in haq. Generosity, or what patience, or what courage do I have unless I somehow find and bring it through from that source, which is not separate, but where there is a relationship between individual will and to some extent conscious choice, which is our definition of will, conscious choice. But there's also something else going on that's really important that I think needs to be acknowledged, and that is, in our understanding and experience, knowledge is not built from the ground up by human conjecture and speculation. Knowledge is always a gift. Knowledge descends upon us. And the knowledge of value appears in the heart. So the heart is not only the instrument of qualitative perception. The purified heart, the awakened heart, is the cognitive instrument of the human consciousness able to perceive value. Just try that on. These are not beliefs. See if it's so. See if it makes sense. I said poetry is a way to say one thing and mean another. I want to read you poem I dearly love by a poet you've never heard of, probably. His name is Rumi Sinan. 16th century, he lived in Istanbul, a great Sufi surrealist in the 16th century. Here's what Rumi Sinan has to say. I've been to his grave, I've been to his home. I dreamt I came to a great city whose palace was nothing but roses. The crown and the throne of its sultan, the garden and chambers were roses, roses. Here they buy and sell nothing but roses. And the scales they use to weigh are roses, roses. Weighing roses with more roses. The market and the bazaar, all roses. The white rose and the red rose were coupled in the garden. Both their faces turned toward the thorn. Both the thorn and the petals are roses, roses. The soil is the rose, the stone is the rose, withered is the rose, fresh is the rose. In the Lord's private gardens, the slender cypress and the maple are roses. Roses are turning the water wheel, roses ground in the mill. And as the wheel turns round and the water flows, its power and stillness are the rose, the rose. And from the rose, a tent appears, filled with every kind of offering. Its gatekeepers are the prophets. The bread they make and the wine they pour are the rose, the rose. Oh, Rumi Sinan, heed the mystery of the nightingale's sorrow and the rose. Every song of the longing nightingale is for the rose, the rose. The qualitative science of the heart. Or in the words of Rumi, love is the astrolabe of reality's mysteries. Whether love is from heaven or earth, it points to reality. However I may try to explain it, when faced with love itself, I'm ashamed of my explanations. Whatever the tongue can make clear, love's silence is better. And though the pen wanted badly to write, when it came to love, its nib split apart. And when it was the turn of the intellect to unfold the meaning of love, it stumbled like a donkey in the mud. In the end, only love could explain itself and what it is to be a lover. Thank you for your attention.